This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
In my kingdom, no flower shall grow.
Place to Be Nation, welcome back to another edition of the movie review of the day here on the Pop Experience. I am Steve Riddle, back again for another go-round. And today I am continuing my journey through the films of Mr. Don DeLuise. We are a little over halfway done. We got about, I think with the one I'm doing here, we have 5 in total still left to go, including, like I said, this one I'm doing today. We've already kind of hit the more bigger films of his, of course, American Tail, Land Before Time, that stretch, and now we're hitting this little kind of weaker stretch here. But obviously with Disney, of course, back on the rise. Bluth has definitely fallen by the wayside, unfortunately. But we have the second film of 1994 that he released, though this one not nearly as successful as, or with those success Thumbelina did have, and one that I had, I think completely fell under the radar, as we'll talk about here. But the film I'm talking about for you today is A Troll in Central Park. This was released on October 7th, 1994. A budget of $23 million, but box office $71,368. Yes, that is not you heard that correctly. Didn't even crack $1 million, let alone 100,000, let alone $1 million. Did this film, starring Dom DeLuise, Cloris Leachman, Charles Nelson Reilly, Philip Glasser, Tawny Glover, Jonathan Pryce, Hayley Mills, Neil Ross, and Frank Welker. It tells the story of a troll who can grow flowers with his magical green thumb that is exiled to Central Park by the evil queen of the trolls, and he befriends and the good troll, whose name's Stanley, befriends a pair of children in Central Park. So, as I usually do, we will start off with the 3 things that worked and 3 things that didn't work. And I'm just going to tell you right now, finding 3 things that worked actually was a little bit of a challenge because, we'll talk about it as we go through. But there were a few things that worked. So, number 1, Stanley is definitely a very unique character in that, he's this troll that has this, magic green thumb, which enables him to grow like flowers and greenery, that sort of thing. And not only that, but the flowers can also come to life as we see, which I think is quite an interesting little take there. And he's just one of those. He's an interesting character in that he's always kind of he tries to be very optimistic as he tries to get through that through Gus. Who's definitely a very moody kid, but you can't blame him, which I'll talk about. But and he obviously he is afraid of Gnorga, the evil queen, but he eventually he does overcome his fear when he realizes that Gus and Rosie, the 2 children, are in trouble, and he even goes out he goes out of his way to to put his life on the line to save them. So we do kind of get he does get his little hero's moment there, after kind of wanting to live in peace with his greenery. He does eventually do the right thing, and when it's necessary. So I will I thought he was definitely one of the few highlights of the film, in essence. Number 2, the relationship between Gus and Rosie is kind of an interesting one because they're definitely both, as we can see, they're kind of neglected a bit by their parents, who are your classic workaholics, and Rosie in particular, considering she's only 2 and obviously can't talk much, a lot of what she's able to express is done more so through like emotion and her facial expressions, that sort of thing. And I think that kind of having her be the antithesis almost of Gus, who's kind of again a moody. He's obviously he kind of knows more that his obviously with Rosie being 2, she doesn't feel the neglection as much as Gus does, who's 7. So. But seeing him kind of, come around and befriend Stanley and he obviously, he's obviously the, big brother who kind of, is like kind of not wanting to hang out with Rosie, but then when he sees her in trouble, he does everything he can to save her. And at one point he even gets turned into a troll himself, by Gnorga. And even then he still, does what he can to try to save his sister. So I thought that, seeing them kind of focus on that relationship, I thought was really well done as well. And then number 3, you kind of have this little like back and forth between Gnorga and her husband, Lort, who's definitely a lot more level-headed than Gnorga is. Like, when they find out that Stanley's, growing flowers, she wants to turn him into stone, but the Lord is basically like, no, let's just banish him to someplace. And you definitely see that the yin and yang between the two of them, where he's kind of more like he could care less about what Stanley does, whereas she's just adamant about getting rid of him and turning him into stone. So I thought again that dynamic between the two of them was pretty well done there. So now we'll go to the 3 things that didn't work, and these are some interesting ones. So number 1, so this film was actually they began production of it in 1990, and they actually completed it in 92, but then held it on the shelf until October 94, which I don't know what the deal was with why they didn't release it in 93, and why they were so adamant about. So this was actually supposed to be released in March, but for whatever reason, they decided to go with Thumbelina first, and then kind of held this off. But of course, as we know, Thumbelina, the production of that had been kind of there was a lot going on here. So Dom DeLuise Studio had ended up had to file for bankruptcy in 92. So by that point, Thumbelina, this film, and our next film were all in development, and eventually some other studio companies ended up having to acquire the studio. So there was a lot of turmoil going on at this point because, like I said, we were right in the middle of the Disney Renaissance, and of course 94 was the year that saw The Lion King release, which completely crushed both Thumbelina. I mean, what Thumbelina and this film did wasn't even a quarter, I think, of what The Lion King ended up doing. So you could tell that the squeeze was in on for Don, and the little momentum he had coming out of like an American Tail and Land Before Time was already gone by this point. But my point is that if this film was done in 92, why didn't they think about releasing this in 93 when there was no like big animated film that year? Because Beauty and the Beast had come out in 91, and then Aladdin came out in 92, and then, like I said, Lion King came out in 94. So why not put this out in 93, and it'll have it, and plus also I know they said that I believe Gary Goldman, the co-director of the film, thought that said that the film wasn't that there was not much in the way of promotion behind it, which also I think hurt it as well, because Warner Brothers, who distributed the film, didn't have any confidence in the film, and I mean, yeah, it's kind of hard to argue with it because the film's not really that good. So, and I know Don Bluth even himself has also distanced himself away from it. So yeah, just you could tell that that it's not a good time to be a part of Don Bluth and his company. So number 2, the fact that we get at one point when Gnorga and Lord come to Central Park, there's a giant tornado that just blows through just completely destroys Central Park, and yet somehow it's not until the next day that the humans kind of realize something has gone wrong, and it's just kind of like are we that oblivious to this giant park being destroyed? Excuse me, and nobody bats an eye to it. Like I don't know. It doesn't make doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Like maybe we should have. I mean, and the fact that no human at that point is even walking through Central Park. I mean, this is in the middle of New York City, one of the most populated cities in the world, and this one particular time, there's like no humans anywhere. So, besides Gus and Rosie, but still, just I don't know, just kind of just something kind of weird I thought about. And then number 3, again, the whole concept of the clearly neglectful parents can be kind of a tired trope, and I feel like they just added it here because they had to give something for Gus and Rosie to kind of be out on their own. Which again, you got 2 little children in Central Park. Yeah, it's 94, but still, I mean. It's not like New York was the safest city at that point. So, it just seems very illogical why these 2 young kids are being able to traverse Central Park by themselves. So, again, just one of those kind of weird things that you always kind of think about when you're watching these films back as an adult. So now we'll go ahead to my awards. My MVP of the film is Dom DeLuise to voice Stanley. He does, he's a very good voice actor. I feel like he's one that you don't hear enough about for how really good he is. I know he's been a fixture of these Don Bluth films. He of course was in Secret and Nim. He was in American Tail, All Dogs Go to Heaven. So he's very and this is his last and this is actually the last film he does with Don Bluth. So. He does do a couple of the direct-to-video sequels of what we just talked about, but Don Bluth had nothing to do with them. So, but yeah, I think he's a guy that you don't think about enough for being for being very, very vocally talented. With the he's kind of similar to like a Phil Harris, where he's got such a distinctive voice that he just brings that voice to all the same characters, but he's definitely a great vocal star that definitely deserves to be fondly remembered. And then in playing with that, I do go with Stanley as my favorite character. Again, this is this troll who just wants to live a peaceful life and grow his flowers. So but he does, like I said, have that good little development. I do also want to give a quick shout out to Cloris Leachman, who plays Gnorga. She she brought a real great sense of villainy to that character. So I will give her, I do want to give her some love as well. My least favorite character though is definitely Gus. He's definitely, again, a very moody kind of young, kid at 7 years old, and just kind of a bit of a brat, and you can't fully blame him because again his parents are neglectful, and he's obviously he wants his dad to spend time with him, but he has to work all the time, so he takes it out unfairly on other people. But I don't know, he just came across as much came across as a just a brat in essence, and it just didn't, I didn't like him. So my favorite scene, it's kind of tough. I'm gonna have to go with where Stanley and Gnorga have their little thumb war battle, where they're trying to push their powers on the other, and Stanley actually ends up winning and turns turns Gnorga into a flower bush, and basically kind of negates all her powers, because after she gets turned into that, that's when Gus no longer becomes Gus becomes a human again and not a troll. So. So I think I would have to be that. And then there are 3 songs in here. We get 2 by Stanley and then 1 by Gnorga. And I think I would have to go with Stanley's Absolutely Green as my my favorite of the songs, of the three songs there. They did do a there was no soundtrack released for the film initially in 94, but there was a limited edition one that came out in 2012, and apparently there was supposed to be like a few songs that were supposed to be in the film but got cut for whatever reason. So and then final grade, I really wanted to enjoy this film, and again, there are obviously some good parts in it, but honestly, it's just kind of just bleh. I mean, it's just forgettable. There's nothing really to it. It's just, I can kind of see why Warner Brothers didn't really put too much promotion behind it, because they kind of realized it wasn't going to kind of do much, and it just. I mean, it's not a terrible film by any stretch of the imagination, but it's definitely just kind of forgettable. So, in terms of my grade here, so just to kind of give you an idea, like I said, I will be ranking these films when we're done here. So, just to kind of give you an idea where we're at, Secret of Them, 8 out of 10. American Tail, 9.5 out of 10. Land Before Time, 9 out of 10. All Dogs Go to Heaven, 8 out of 10. Rockadoodle, 6 out of 10. And Thumbelina, 5.5 out of 10 are my current grades. And for this film, currently this is my lowest rated film at a 3.5 out of 10. It's just, again, just not that good. And hopefully we haven't hit the nadir for Dom DeLuise. I'll be interested to see. Of course, our next film will be the 1995 film, The Pebble and the Penguin. We'll see if this one kind of turns things around, or if we continue to kind of slide downward as we hit the end here. But again, we'll see what happens there. But that's going to do it for me for this episode. Thank you again for listening. We've had it's been really fun doing this pod, kind of kind of going into some films I've never seen before, again, kind of checking off some films off the shame list. And I know we got some big, good theme weeks coming up here. Of course, we got our Toy Story week to celebrate Toy Story 5, and then a bunch of other good ones coming up. So be on the lookout for that, and continue to support us. We definitely appreciate it, and we're looking forward to what the summer's going to bring. So with that, I am Steve Riddle. Oh, and also, just real quick, one more thing. Over on the PTB Facebook group, the Greatest SummerSlam Match of All Time tournament is ongoing. So please make sure to get in there and vote if you haven't. Just wanted to throw that out there as well. But with that, I am Steve Riddle. This has been the movie review of the day here on the Pop Experience, and we'll see you next time.